Okay, start over. Yeah, keep rolling. I'm just doing that. And welcome to
Inside the Sulphurbath.
Inside the Sulphurbath, episode 10.
Yeah, we're in double digits.
Kind of blew that one, man. This is why we shouldn't do a live show, right? We could just go back and start that again.
Okay. What are you going to do? Careful.
Oh.
George Lucas.
That had nothing to do with LucasArts or Disney.
No.
That was just me whistling.
He's sued birds before. Successfully.
I could believe it, yeah. But that actually wasn't close enough to said unidentified robot to warrant any kind of suing, right? That's pretty bad.
Yeah. Even as a ringtone, it's like general robot sound.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, pretty much.
So episode 10. Yeah, what's up, Blaine? How you been?
I'm all right. Doing good. Just wanted to, for the folks viewing at home, we just watched a nice little video. We watched it. Interesting collage of sound and picture.
Right, we weren't actually hearing it here. I hope the folks at home were, though. We recorded that kind of very spontaneously. You know, every show begins with a Sulphurbath production, which is usually a somewhat experimental short film. And last night, what was it, Fumio, 6 p.m., and we were like, oh, what are we going to do for tomorrow's bit? And we're like, let's just start, you know, getting clips like this. And I had the idea, like, we'll get close-ups of the hands playing the instrument and kind of throw it all together, and probably we'll get some sort of cacophonous dissonance, but maybe it'll be pretty cool. And I think at times some of it fits together, but I think the approach on that one has something to do with maybe like deep listening, or like in classical music when you're like really trying to pay attention. Can I hear everything that's going on? Yeah. And to me, that there's something about, you know, how the brain works and the neural network trying to fracture itself into identifying different things, and at the same time you're seeing each cell of what's happening. So there's so many different things going on. What will you tune into? And I think millions of different people will all tune into something different in that little short.
Yeah, that was like an insane Brady Bunch intro.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Just like they're just going berserk. My favorite was the one with the I don't know what you were jangling. But the way that it was shot, it looked really, really crisp and clear. Like the background was out of focus, but we saw, I don't know, it was like sounds.
Yeah, I think that's
like
what it was
middle
called, Nick.
row,
The
right.
hoof things. It's like a percussion instrument. What's that called? Oh, we don't know.
Okay.
And it's basically like animal hooves roped together and treated, and then you shake them.
He's the world's leading authority on it and doesn't know what
And he
it's
doesn't
called.
know,
Yeah.
It's just called a shaker. We're gonna call it a shaking
stuff I found.
device. So yeah, that was a lot of, and I should explain. Fumio definitely collaborated with me on that one. So I don't know if I can name them all in order, but what were we doing? I was on piano. You were on upright bass, Fumio. I did acoustic guitar, concertina, auto harp. You did banjo. I did violin. You did shakers, hand drums, cymbals, some various other stuff in there. But basically, a very true experiment. And we didn't know what we were going to get. Would it sound just totally putrid, or would it be something like intriguing enough to warrant like, hey, that's cool?
Yeah.
And so that's what we're going to hope for. So
for you eagle eyes at home, I was in there doing one of those.
Yeah.
I don't know if you spotted it.
Yeah. Got your nose. Wait, that's your thumb.
Yeah.
We talked about that, Blaine. I thought we weren't going to do that.
But off the air.
Off the air.
Not for the viewers at home.
Yeah.
You're
going to start a whole new trend of like, oh, you remember this thing? That was badass.
My uncle got my nose.
Yeah.
And held it for ransom.
Oh, man. Did you ever get it back?
No. Just sent me a bloody envelope one time.
Man.
And you got your nose. It was just like clippings put together. I know it was him.
Jeez. And about that, you couldn't even say, that stinks, uncle.
I had no clue.
You had no clue.
Nope.
So what else is new? Anything new in the world with you that we can talk about without getting in trouble?
Nope.
Nope.
Nothing.
Okay, cool. And
court order. Sorry.
Yeah, right. Don't go spreading this stuff over the internet now.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm going to see since.
Cool. So thank you everybody at home for welcoming us. What the hell? Let's welcome everybody here at home. Jeez, do you want to take this part?
Thank you.
There you go.
For letting
That's what
us
we're trying to say.
into your lives via computer, television, mobile device, whatever. And enjoying the show. We got a good one tonight. We got a kind of a
awesome.
It's a like usual. We kind of have topics on different variety of artists and performers and musicians, and we get political discussions, artistic discussions, and we usually wrap it up at the end with like a jam segment between all of us. And it's kind of nice to stay tuned for because we all let loose, and if something makes a sound, everyone in the room is free to pick it up and kind of collaborate, which is great. I really like the way that
I love that
comes together.
Really
yeah,
is.
I play that back frequently. I listen to those.
So do I. That's always the highlight for me. I mean, the guest segments are always amazing, but to me, it's like, what did we all do together in that collaborative moment that we didn't notice that second? And we watch it back and we're like, oh, no way! And it's always that really excitement if you didn't notice it at the time.
Yeah, it's and if you stick around, hopefully we'll be able to contribute to one more of those for the record.
I think it'd be cool.
Yeah, it's great, especially when you play it back and you listen to. I mean, when you're fixated on what you're playing or piano, guitar, drums, what be it, you're just concentrating on that, and then when you get to play it back, it's great. You get to hear what everyone else is doing in a different way, in a different context, and it's really you're like, oh wow, he was really wailing on that thing, right? That's I love hearing that, and hopefully we'll be contributing one more of those tonight.
Yep, and also mentioning episode 10, we've got quite an archive now. Everybody home, you can go check out the archives of the last episodes. I really recommend you do. We're only at episode 10, but it feels like our centennial, right? Because we had a lot of great guests on the show already.
Yeah,
we've tackled a lot of great topics in our conversation. If you go through the stuff that we've discussed already, we're already like ahead of the wave, right? We're accomplishing a lot. I really feel great about what's going on here with the show. So check out the archives. I have to say, like us on where's the likes? Facebook. Just like us on Facebook. Just like us in general.
Person. If you see something, say hi.
Yeah, be friendly.
That's
and we're laughing with that, but that's the thing about me, man. I just want everybody to be friendly.
Hey, Mike.
And
I like you.
Cool, man. Awesome. And what's the other thing you do? You like us and also you subscribe. Oh, yeah, we're trying to build subscribers on our YouTube page.
Yeah,
this is really important because YouTube, if we get 100 subscribers, then we'll get streaming access through our YouTube account. Right now we're on Ustream, and Ustream is really great. We'll probably keep both, even if we get them both. But I think it'd be really a great advantage for us to get a free free streaming account with YouTube, which we can get if we can get 100 subscribers. So if anybody out there has YouTube accounts, please go to our YouTube channel, which is called Mention Condition, and subscribe to the channel. You'll see all of the archives on that page, as well as a lot of musical performances by all our friends and collaborators.
Cool. Yeah.
So
what is on tap for tonight? What are you gonna?
Yes. So we've got 3 guests with us tonight. First, we've got the Philospher Caemeron Craine. Cameron is a guest tonight that was led here by Sean Randall, who is the editor-in-chief at the Mantle. Mantlethought.org, I believe, is the webpage. The Mantle is a really great blog of essays and progressive writings of some really great progressive thinkers. And Sean and Chris Haddix and Kavitha Rajagopalan, who else? Justin Petropoulos.
Yeah.
And tonight
great.
Caemeron Craine. We've had we really want to thank the Mantle for helping us and collaborating with us as well. We've really enjoyed those segments that they've fed us. So.
Yeah, a group of like-minded individuals that we give them a sort of a vocal piece where we get to have them elaborate on stuff that they may have written and published online, and can extrapolate a little further on. It's nice to be able to have a conversation. Whereas if you're reading an article, you're just getting a one-sided thing. But if you
exactly,
you can ask the questions that you might have come to mind while reading it.
Because also in designing, but in talking about what this show would become, we were kind of like, well, we don't want to just be sitting up here preaching like, hey, this is what we think is cool. But I really wanted that element of like, hey, I don't know anything. I need people here to learn me. And so that's that's really honestly where we're coming from with that segment is we're sitting here in Bushwick. I'm a video guy. I know a lot of musicians and stuff, and we all collaborate on projects. But so much going on in the world. Information is accessible now. People are becoming more and more connected these days. I love the idea of cooperation instead of competition. And I feel like coming into this show is something that's really cool that I think we can cooperate and do all these really great segments with. And so, I wanted to openly state we're open. This is very loose, but I want to mix what is going on in the world today. What are the real issues that society faces, in addition to, hey, look at all this great art and music. Maybe the two are connected. Maybe there's actually a correlation. We can. I think things in the world can really change and really change for the better by focusing not only on the bad and the negative, and hey, let's talk what are the bad issues in the world. But
yeah, so far we've done mostly like politics, philosophy, and arts, and tonight's no different. So we're gonna have a philosophical segment where we talk about the issues that are on our guest's mind, and then we're gonna move on to Kumasi J, Barnett, and we're gonna be discussing art, his art. Hopefully we'll get into discussions of methods and what you'd like to say and that sort of thing, and techniques. I'm always interested in finding out how a person works and what they do, and what their intent is, and so I can't wait to.
And he's got a lot of great slides for us to look at tonight too, so stick around, everybody. We're going to check out some great artwork by Kumasi J. Barnett.
Yeah.
And then the third segment, we've got jazz singer Cleve Douglass with us here tonight. For anybody that caught last week's episode, Cleve was the singer at the beginning of the show, and he did this really great collaborative video with us that night up on the roof here. Yeah, and that turned out really cool.
Really good. That was great.
And just hearing the guys in here practicing a little while ago, Cleve will be backed by Nick Chen and Fumio Tashiro tonight. They're going to be a jazz trio for us, and we are really excited to hear that. It's going to be awesome. So it'll be quite a show. Saddle up your horses.
Yes.
What is that? Should I have said that? What does that mean?
Too late now.
Stay with us because we got some really, really great content tonight. So stick around, stay with us. Very cool.
Yeah.
Hey, Blaine, knock, knock.
Who's there?
Well, I just wanted to see if you'd be conservative about it, or maybe you would, riff on that in some new
Listen,
way.
I
but
take jokes
who's
very
there?
seriously.
Everybody's who's there? It's the same answer all the time.
I'd like to tell a knock, knock joke.
Can you?
Are you familiar with the format?
Yes.
Okay. That's it.
That's great.
Yeah. So
Nice.
So good show for you tonight. It's great, and I look forward to these every week. So
Very cool.
I hope you do too.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So we're gonna go right into our first segment. We're gonna bring out Cameron.
Can't wait.
Cameron Craine, thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
come on out.
All right.
Right, thanks for having me.
Of course, man.
My heard.
Cool.
It's okay?
You're good right there. You comfortable? How's it going, Cameron?
Kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm in right now. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for coming on the show. So, like I mentioned before, we came to meet you through Sean Randall and the folks at the Mantle.
Yeah.
And I've read a few of your articles that are on the Mantle right now. There's quite a few, so we're going to have the links of everything that, on the archive as well.
Oh, great.
And we want to encourage everybody to go out and research you and read some of those articles as well. But right now, we've got you. So don't do that at home yet. You're here right in the presence of Caemeron Craine now. When Sean first suggested you would be coming on the show, he said, I got a philosopher for you. And
Okay.
I said, oh, that's great. I love knowledge. And I wanted
Good.
to basically kind of get into the thing and maybe to give the folks at home kind of a little background about, where you're from and kind of what school of thought and what you want to discuss tonight and kind of what some of your articles are about.
Okay, well, I mean, I don't know how much you want in terms of general background, I guess. In terms of general approaches to philosophy, if you're familiar with the distinction, I would be more in a sort of continental vein of philosophy. People make this distinction between continental philosophy and analytic philosophy, whatever that means. But basically, it has to do with the continent of Europe. And I think that in some ways, it means that my overall approach is probably more engaged with the history of philosophy, whereas a lot of people in the Anglophone world are more kind of issue-oriented. I mean, so that would be the rough distinction. But I'd rather talk about the pieces on the Mantle or the issues involved there. What I'm trying to do, one of the figures that I have a lot of interest in is Gilles Deleuze, and he also collaborated famously with Félix Guattari to write a couple of books which have the subtitle Capitalism and Schizophrenia. These are Anti-Oedipus and 1,000 Plateaus. And I have broader interest in Deleuze's other writings. But what I'm trying to do on the Mantle with this series of blog posts right now is really focus on some of the key concepts in Deleuze or in Delueze and Guattari in a way that, I hope is accessible to people even if they're not familiar with their work, because these guys, you pick up one of these books like 1,000 Plateaus and it can seem very abstruse and hard to get a handle on, so that's really the main idea of the blog, and then to try to bring out something about what they're saying about politics ultimately, and then hopefully this will move towards some thoughts about maybe, I don't know, what is to be done.
And I love that, making the knowledge a little bit more accessible. I myself have personally gone in and looked into Deleuze and been like, oh, this is too much for me. I need some context. I need a class. So I'm one of those people that does appreciate that. I want to be able to observe these things and talk about them, understand them, but a lot of it is pretty thick, so pretty dense.
Well, and part of why it's hard, I think, is because a lot of what they're up to is that they're trying to, they would say, create concepts or invent concepts. But you could say, they're trying to sort of lay out different ways of looking at the world or looking at these issues in the first place. So if you don't start getting a grip on that terminology, you can just be at a loss, because they're not really talking about things in the same way as people often tend to talk about them.
And how do you mean that you're interested in Deleuze for his work in the history of philosophy? He has some works where he goes back and kind of like reassesses the knowledge that's been collected before him.
Well, yes. So the first few books that he wrote were really sort of historical studies of figures in the history of philosophy. So his first book was a little book on David Hume. He wrote a book on Nietzsche, a couple of books on Spinoza, a book on Henri Bergson, which kind of revitalized Bergson's credibility in certain ways. There's also a book on Kant, one on Leibniz. One of the things interesting about these books is that he, to my mind, he has a tendency to engage with these historical figures in a different way than a lot of people do. He's not just kind of doing this scholarship that's overly concerned with getting, the academy or what have you. We're trying to bring out certain problems, and he at one point he famously described himself as, during this period, imagining himself taking the philosopher from behind and making them give birth to a monstrous child.
A Leviathan? No.
I don't know. Monstrous child. It's important that the child was their own, he said, but also that it be properly monstrous. So, for whatever that's worth. It's interesting stuff.
Very cool.
Is he just trying to father the concepts that they initially came out with?
Or something.
It's almost like trying to take hold of someone else's ideas and concepts, or is he just trying to present them in a different way or put his own personal spin on it? I mean, what do you think his goal was to do that? Why would someone do something like that?
Yeah, I don't know. I'd be tempted to say that it's more a matter of trying to bring out and the fundamental tensions that are there in the philosopher's work, and then looking for some way to make them consistent, even though on the surface at first they don't seem to be consistent. Right? Whereas a lot of scholars will, instead try to make certain distinctions to avoid those tensions. In those works, he has a real tendency to just bring those tensions out and kind of take them as far as they can go, and then say, well, so this person seems to be contradicting himself, but not if you get that what's really important is this sort of plane of consistency behind it, like the way the person's consistent, if that makes sense.
So in some sense, reassessing, I mean, a little bit later, but making this more accessible by digging into some of the things that weren't paid attention into some of those works before that.
Would you put it that way, I suppose.
But not so much like as an editor, but he's analyzing these things and putting his own take on them as well, right? So he supports what he's aligned with. Or is it just pure critique?
No, I wouldn't say it's quite pure critique. It's Deleuze thought that what philosophy is about is creating concepts. And if you are looking at a philosophical concept, if you want to ask what it is or work on defining it, you have to find the problem that it's trying to respond to. So I think that's more what's going on, is that you can't just look at these sort of concepts on their own. You have to try to dig behind them to whatever problem, whatever figure was really engaging with, and that's what's really interesting. And he's trying to bring that out.
Awesome. Yeah, you mentioned earlier about a lot of methods by a lot of philosophers to focus on some, wide ideology, like a giant umbrella that can address a lot of things, where this seems a little bit more detailed, like you say, going and identifying the specific problems. It seems like more of a detailed approach, or at least more intricate, right? Like, I feel like the umbrella ideology is so easy to fall on, right? And say, oh, it's this. But I mean, every time that's stated, there really is that question of like, well, what's deeper behind it? What are we actually talking about?
Yeah, I think so. That's part of why I like Deleuze, is I think he tends to kind of get behind those. We have certain common sense ways of understanding the world. We throw out certain terminology like we know what we're talking about, and just not accepting that and looking for deeper levels of explanation, I guess.
And does that leave us with a giant rift in our perceptions of reality and what's actually going on?
Well, I don't know. I mean, on that point, to try to move it perhaps a little bit more towards politics, one thing on that point is that there's a real resistance in Deleuze's work, or in his work with Guattari in particular, to certain types of explanations of, say, political phenomena, right? So one way we might try to explain something that happens is to act as though there's some abstract ideology or something that's doing a lot of work. And they really tend to reject that kind of explanation. This is not really an explanation to say, well, there are these ideologues who spewed some propaganda and tricked people into doing things. Well, what caused the people to go along with this, right? I mean, in what sense were people wanting something that this is responding to? And that's the kind of question that they generally want to ask. What's going on at the level of desire really is a sort of a key concept for them. And this idea that it's really desire that's producing objects and producing rules and organizing identities and the like, right? Rather than thinking there's some, it's like the state, for instance, it's not just something, but a certain kind of organization of desire, sort of bringing it into a certain kind of structure that then exerts power effects, right? It's not something,
right?
Not in itself.
It's an expression of another element, right?
Right, or of these, or a kind of the way that these factors are coming together to form some kind of power apparatus, right? Because, of course, there are effects of power going on if we talk about, say, the state oppressing its people or something. But what's really going on there is more complex, right? You've got different people who are involved in running the government, the administration, the bureaucracy, all of these little kinds of relations, and those relations then with the citizens. And it's not just some abstract homogenous state that's oppressing people. It's all this complex, murky stuff.
And then it becomes more of a dynamic, systemic thing. But does that complicate the issue? I mean, would these guys argue that this makes it more complicated, but we have to go through this, or would they argue this simplifies it and gives us more ground to reach different thoughts about it.
No, I think that it makes things more complicated. There's a great, I don't have the page number, but there's a great point in 1,000 Plateaus. It's some 350 pages in. It's about halfway through the chapter on called The War Machine. And they've been going through this, we've been reading for 35 pages just in this one chapter, and they've been going through this whole kind of grand historical account of how things have developed. And then all of a sudden there's a sentence that says, things are far more complicated than we have let on so far. That far in everything. Right. So no, I think that ultimately that is their kind of position, that things are really, really complicated. And in particular, I want to say that they're sort of a lot more complicated now once we're in these contemporary conditions, or once we're really in capitalism, I think, is when they might want to say things start getting really complicated, because perhaps in older social formations, you had more of a tendency to have a kind of, you have a sovereign, you have a king as the locus of power. But if now that we have this kind of it's much more diffuse, and it's harder to locate where exactly the power is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, which seems to fracture the responsibility as well, right? If it's so complicated and you can't see where the locus is, like, well, who's responsible for what's going on here? It's so spread thin.
Right, sort of no one, right? So, if we look at capitalism and say, oh, workers are being exploited, or bankers on Wall Street are causing harm. Well, they were trying to be a little bit more specific, I guess, with bankers, but still, it's not like, if you start talking about wanting to change things, it's not like we can just, we're not just talking about deposing a king.
Right.
Right? It's much more complex than that.
There's like structural and systemic changes that have to be made, and then you have to fit people into behaving acceptably into that new structure that you've created. It's like it's asking everyone to change their behavior all of a sudden, which is so much more difficult than just beheading a king.
Right.
Yeah. Like that was really easy.
Yeah. We just behead the king.
Yeah. And then be like, see what happens?
I mean, you could make that
and
argument.
then the next king comes up and he's good. Mm-hmm. But when it's systematic changes that have to take place, it's so difficult in order to change society, or just systems in place, government systems, and to expect everyone to just all of a sudden, now we do it this way. That's so much more complex and so much more difficult to achieve. Especially when everyone's got their own ideals and goals on an individual level, which is so celebrated.
Well, yeah, and then that gets to a certain aspect of the problem I think is interesting to take through Delueze and Guattari's work, is that you have the idea that now capitalism, unlike previous social formations, really kind of functions by, in a certain way, allowing anything to go, right? So we're not trying to pigeonhole our desires and make sure that they're fitting under this what the king says is okay or what have you, but sort of you can do whatever you want, you can want whatever you want, or at least this is the line that we're asked to buy into, right?
Even told that you should do whatever you want,
think different,
yeah, exactly,
right? Be yourself. And so we have to think about the way in which those things are cliches, I think, and behind that, the kind of power that it's exerting itself. So this is the last piece I put up on the mantle was about societies of control, and I think this is one of the key ideas there, is that we are sort of encouraged to do whatever we want, or led to believe that we can, and that this kind of freedom can at the same time be an expression of power. Everything is under control. So you can do whatever you want so long as it is, fitting in with those forms of behavior that are sort of actually allowed, right? So there's all these kinds of unwritten rules about what isn't allowed. I used an example in the piece about employers having expectations that you'll respond to emails when you're not in the office, or that sort of thing, right? Something's freeing, okay, I'm walking around, I can check my email anytime, but now I'm also expected to do so, right? So that kind of thing, where you can get at the same time, what seems to be more freedom, and maybe even is in a certain sense, but everything is under control in another sense, right? So if you start doing things that are, you think about NSA surveillance and so on, right? If you start using too many of the wrong kinds of words in your emails, well, then you're going to start getting in trouble, right? So write anything in your emails you want. Don't worry about the fact that they are eventually reading your emails, well, unless you're going to start using words that might get you into trouble, right? So I'd recommend you don't get into a protracted debate with a friend over Gmail about terrorism or something, because you'd start kicking off those sort of watchwords, right?
Yeah, you're free to do it, but and then living under this threat, it brings up this idea of the illusion of safety, the illusion of freedom, and who's actually controlling in some way what I think. And to get to that point where you're thinking like, oh, is what I'm thinking being controlled, or, but that article specifically got to me because, this is one of the big things, is that controlling a society is, so many times it's carried out militaristically where, seems like we live in a pretty big police state now. And where everybody in this room is fairly young and we've got lots of years ahead of us to live in this country and to raise kids and to whatever we do, but it feels, the older I get and the more that I see that's going on, I try to say, is there something I can do to affect this kind of change? Like you said, with the complexity, is like I could throw a rock in the water and cause some ripples and make it worse. I don't know. But we're so controlled, and so I mean, what's your take on this, and also Deleuze's? Like, how do we? First, I mean, it's about realizing how complex it is, and that there are controls even when we don't see them, right?
Yeah. Okay.
But what's the step after that? I mean, is this something that's like be aware of it and this is going to happen? It's
so you're asking me about resistance or something like that.
Yeah.
And this is something that I'm still thinking about a bit. I've kind of set it up as the stakes for what would be the next piece on the Mantle, so you can all look forward to that happening sometime. I think it's a hard question, but I can say a couple of things given where my thoughts are now. I'll try. So one is to, if you think about what's going on with this idea of a society of control, that I suggested very briefly in the piece, maybe what we need to question is the idea that all criminals ought to be caught or something. And I don't know if that's quite the right way to put it, but what I'm thinking about is that there's this kind of tendency to think that those who are breaking the rules are sort of other to the point of not even being considered as part of our shared humanity or something, right? So I'm thinking of, for instance, ways that people might think of criminals or terrorists, or the NRA saying the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun or something. Well, this is supposing that certain people are bad guys, right? Or so once you have kicked off enough of these watchwords or markers that are going to indicate that you're not under control, then you're also, in an interesting way, not part of society, right? So like prisoners as just kind of outside of even who we're considering members of our society. And sometimes people get sent to prison for, what you or I might think is fairly minor stuff, like they've got some marijuana or something like that. But there's this tendency to say, well, then they're not in the group of the everyone who has the freedom we were talking about anymore, right? So that's one thing that I would suggest is that, in simply thinking about it, we might move toward thinking about, or rather trying to change how we're thinking about it. So if there's something to the point that I was just making, maybe we need to think about how it is that these people, even if they broke the law, I mean, they're still not just human beings, but they're still part of our society. And not just exclude them kind of from consideration because they have broken the law, particularly when increasingly the structures of control would they can cover all sorts of things where, I mean, if you really think about it, how many of us haven't broken the law ever in any way? by speeding or running a red light. Or
well, I mean, it seems like the law is pretty much written to make sure we're all breaking
Right.
it all the time.
Right.
So,
So it's we're all criminals. We just haven't been caught yet.
Yeah.
But if that's a reconceptualization, maybe that already starts doing some work against our tendency to think that, because someone has broken the rules or whatever, then they're outside,
And then, convicted of a felony, you can't vote.
Right.
So there are people that get convicted falsely all the time and becoming a wage slave in a prison and a whole generation of people in there.
I was always concerned about that by people who are convicted of a felony can't vote, as if they have different ideals just in general.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they're just gonna be like, oh yeah, I would vote for a total criminal now that I've committed a crime. Like I think like mass crime in the streets. Like they still they still want to raise a family and have a healthy society.
And the idea of institutionalization, right, and being able to like institutionalize these people and what's the word I'm looking for? Reestablish them into society, basically like re-encode them and get them back out on the street. Rehabilitation, and like what is that about? And so not to make that too simplistic, but these ideas of resistance to this thing.
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing is that what you're saying is learning and being able to get perspective on this and being able to understand it at a deeper level, other than just like Delueze is saying, this overall arching ideology that you can just quote every day.
Yeah. So that was one suggestion I was going to make. There's another one, and the other one is the one that might be more meaningful. I mean, if the first one seems like this is too abstract, this is some philosopher saying, well, you should study philosophy for political resistance or what have you. I mean, I can understand that. I mean, how do we do things, right? And I think there is some stuff there in Delueze and Guattari and related to some of the things that came out in our discussion already. When we were talking about it being really complex, well, then you have to change people's behavior. But the suggestion would be that we're not going to make the real progress trying to institute that top down, right? I mean, we could potentially try to take over the state and then, force people to behave in certain ways. But probably that's not what we want. So rather, and I think they should go together with the idea of examining how we're thinking about things, but that we need to think about how to change our habits and our just sort of way of being in the world, if you like. So there's a big notion in Delueze and Guattari about micropolitics and the idea that, politics isn't just something that we do when we go to the voting booth or what have you, but it's diffused throughout sort of everything that we do. So they would encourage us to think about sort of the politics of our just daily behavior, and you can get that kind of thought from any number of people. But in terms of, how to, say, resist these structures of control or what have you, I think that's the real hope. That then what you'd get ultimately is not this kind of, cliched type version of be yourself, express yourself, think different, what have you. But ultimately, a space that actually allowed people to sort of really be different in a more meaningful way. And that would provide a certain kind of resistance to the subtle attempts to kind of bring everything under control. I don't know. Does that make any sense?
No, definitely.
All right.
Yeah. Subtle resistance of bringing everything under control. Yeah, so you've given us a lot of food for thought. I would, with the show's, of course, limited, but I want to pick your brain. Hopefully you'll stay with us and hang out a little bit tonight, because there's definitely more questions. But yeah, is there a specific webpage besides the Mantle that you have or anything like that we should share with everybody? Or
No.
Okay.
No.
I gotcha.
No, I've got articles up on the Mantle, and I would encourage people to go check those out, and also the other stuff on there. Sean and Chris have done a good job of bringing a lot of interesting stuff together there. So for sure, go to the Mantle, mantlethought.org.
Mantlethought.org. Cool. Excellent. Caemeron Crain, thank you very much for joining us
Thanks
tonight.
for
Yes, cool.
Yeah. Nice to meet you, man.
Awesome. So a lot of food for thought, and I know a lot of that stuff, like we were saying earlier, is quite dense, and so to be able to sit and talk to somebody that can, put it in terms that I can get with a little bit easier really helps.
Yeah. That's the danger about talking to a philosopher. You never feel smarter when you're done.
I think that's kind of the whole. For me, that's always what excited me about it. It's like, oh, it's good to stand back and realize that I wasn't so smart about any subject that I thought I was, And usually there can be something right after that will inspire me to go dig it up more. Like, tonight I'll be looking at more of that stuff. And
yeah, well, that's like when I had a high school teacher, philosophy teacher. He was in seminary school, and he was almost going to be a priest. And then we never got the full story as to why he never did it. But he was a really cool guy, and he stuck with me. And it really just it was a philosophy class, but it was really just a world religion introductory class. Like he would show you, oh, this is Buddhism, this is Hinduism, this is Islam, this is Christianity, and with no preference. Which was cool because he went to seminary school. Like I imagined he had a preference, but not at all. He must have had some sort of falling out with it some way. But then he showed us every little thing, and he was just kind of like, "Okay, this is what I have to teach you." And now no one's looking. Okay, here's what we're really going to talk about, guys.
Oh, that's cool.
And it really stuck with me, like a great guy, and just enough to really mess with your head for the rest of your life.
Yeah, right. You got to keep going another 10 years to get out of that.
Yeah, exactly.
But I love that too regarding religion. I was a religious studies major in college, and I spent a lot of time like thinking. I was raised as a Christian, but that kind of the more I learned about the history of the Bible and about religions and world organized religions, that kind of changed how I thought about it, a bunch of things. But what you're saying that he taught in that style of, I really like that idea that all the religions were just a bunch of different cultures that kind of basically have the same kind of concept. Maybe none of us have gotten to that point where we can really pin down what it is yet. Right. But there's something behind like the stories and the mythology. Like there's something there.
Yeah.
I can't really claim like, oh, I think that there's a God. But
that was what was cool. Where I took from it. It was basically like you just lay them all on top of each other and a template arises. Yeah. And then you're like, oh, it's all the same story. Yeah. And it all serves the same psychological purpose, no matter what you believe in. You're like, just belief in general, or something that sticks with you, whether the symbols are different, don't matter, because don't look at the symbol. You want to look through the symbol as to what it symbolizes. You can stare it across all day long, but the point is lost if you're just staring at the cross. It's like not the cross, it's the concept that needs to come through and break through. And it doesn't even matter what specific religion it is. It's just as long as you feel the psychological purpose is served. That's what I took away from it anyway. I thought it was great.
Yeah, really. And I love that idea as religion as philosophy, as knowledge, instead of like the fanatic calling it truth, basically. And instead of like, here's some knowledge. Truth I know is that I'm alive, but beyond that, do I even know that? Basically. And of course that goes there into that whole world of thought. But, as a concept of knowledge and how much greatness is in the stories and the lessons of morality and all this great stuff. Really, stories from the Bible alone are just rife with this amazing content. I almost said literary content, which you get smacked for, but at the same time, like looking at them as a body of knowledge that humans can relate to, and we're all from different places, different languages, and everything. And the fact that we have similar stories, that's how we're relating. But to view it as a philosophy, and like Cameron was suggesting, like creating concepts with this. And so, like you said, with the cross, like what's the actual concept of this? And I think it would serve a lot of people from all walks of life if they look up and they identify somehow with the cross of Christ, to really dig deeper and like say, what is the concept of that? And then we have the concept that we've ended up with today, and then there's also the history of how that concept got there. And then there's also us living outside that today in our modern realm. But, I in studying all that stuff and still studying, and the more I learn, the more I feel like there's something very deeply important about all the religions of the world that humans couldn't do without. But at the same time, there's a scar,
Yeah, exactly. It got us to where we are, but do we still need it in its old forms? Right. Like the symbols are very old now, and they're from a world away, and the books are from a time where the world was flat and 100 miles in diameter. Yeah. You know what I mean? So the symbols of the stories don't relate to us anywhere near as the way they used to, but that's not to say the story can't be told in just with in a different context, in a current context, in a modern one. Yeah. Basically, I'm starting a religion. If anyone wants to subscribe to my channel.
Yeah, and it's all about how Ra came from space and invented a Stargate that he hid in the desert, and then the Egyptians were born. Awesome. Cool, man.
We're gonna get sued 2 times.
Can we get sued for just like mentioning references and doing R2D2? I don't know. I worked for a lawyer recently. Did I tell you my lawyer story?
No, what'd you do?
Nothing. So our next segment. I know that's the thing. I really am like in some way I'm intimidated. Like, can I even talk about that? Guy could probably sue the shit out of me for anything.
Yeah.
Don't even say anything. Just please, sir, don't sue me. And you know, he was holding all the cards basically, and I was like, I did the work. Can I get paid?
Please, sir.
Please. But with that intimidation factor of like, man, can I ask this guy to pay me? Is that against the law? And you know, I bet you he could figure out some way that it would be against the law.
He would bill you for the time it took to ask him to be paid.
Yeah. Now we're getting into the specifics of. I don't know if he knows my webpage or anything, but it was the kind of thing where it was like, oh hey, you know, are you going to pay me and blah 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 blah. And then the response was like, oh well, because I took 5 minutes to read this email, I'm not going to have time to send the check today. I'm like, what? Really? What? Anyway. So, and then that intimidation factor where he's like, you know, openly saying, oh, my job is not about the truth. It's about convincing others that my truth is accurate. And to have a whole profession based on it just seems backwards to me. Like, should that be allowed? Like, they're openly like, oh, yeah, who's the best liar? And to me, it's like, you know, I get it that if you're in a room full of liars and snakes, we've got to thoroughly identify and go through all the knowledge and who witnessed what and all that. But
no,
there's this open thing about the
I
lies.
want the best liar working for me, though.
Yeah.
You know, like I want the best liar.
Yeah. And they get thoroughly rewarded in society for that. And so you end up with like Confederacy of dunce liars.
Yeah,
man.
exactly.
Let's move into our second segment right now, which is our artist segment. I'm very pleased to bring on the show Kumasi J. Barnett.
Yes.
Kumasi's a good friend. Woo! Kumasi, how you doing?
Living the dream.
All right.
Living the dream. Yeah.
Awesome.
Let me tell you this before we start. I was raised without any religion from two parents, one who completely like absolved himself of any religion for the time that he was around, and another one who was very spiritual but never talked about it. So like imagine Christianity and the Bible as real to you as Star Wars, like just stories.
Yeah.
So
that's where I'm at now. It took a good 25 years, but
it's really weird.
Yeah.
It's really weird because it's like being at a Star Wars or a Star Trek convention.
well, that's the perfect. You're bringing the perfect metaphor too, because I was thinking about it recently, and who has nailed it better than Yoda? No, you know, it's the
Jesus.
there's a force. I'm saying no, even better
Jesus.
than
Yeah, he had great stories.
than,
He's the one who invented that magic trick.
Nailed it.
Oh yeah, Jesus! Like
Yeah.
he did this, then he fed a bunch of people
Yeah,
right
that's
afterwards.
Jesus. That's
Whoa.
Jesus right there.
Man, he's giving of himself. And,
Yeah.
Um,
That's the blood. No.
but yeah, the idea of the force and all of that. I mean, I thought that as a young kid and when I reanalyze that today, I feel like, hey, I'm more with that than the giant guy in the sky with a beard. You know, it's the force,
Yeah.
midichlorians, whatever.
That
Let's
was
call it
it.
that.
Yeah.
But we're going to digress and get away from that, right?
Yeah, let's go. Let's go.
Let's do this. All right, so cool. What's up with you? How have you been?
Oh, I'm doing all right. I
Yeah?
can't complain. Got some free time.
Awesome. Free time is good. The last time I saw you was for Bushwick Open Studios, and you came
Yeah.
and showed with us.
Yeah, that went really well. I really liked it. It
Cool.
was really good.
I was really honored to have you here. Your work was amazing. I was talking earlier with somebody. For the folks at home, Kumasi showed some work here when we took part in Bushwick Open Studio. We set the studio here up as a gallery. And he has this really great paintings that we're going to get into in a second. But when you came and took down your work, Fumio and Miho and I were all like, do you guys feel that loss of energy now that his work is gone? It was serious. It's not something you notice when it's there every day. But your work had an aura, and I've compared you before to Mark Rothko. To me, has this kind of like giant.
Wow.
Well, there's this the colors and the size. There's this effect. You go into a room and that's hanging there. There's a psychological effect that can't be denied. And even if it's there a while and you get used to it, whatever. That day that you took it down and it was gone, I was like, that's why I love Kumasi. Because that energy's gone now.
Yeah,
That's
there's
weird.
like a vibrancy to it.
Yeah. Because
You feel
they're-
it in the environment that you're
Yeah.
in. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But they look nothing like Rothko, which is great because actually when I was growing up, probably one of the painters who I would want to be would be Rothko.
Oh, yeah?
Minus the suicide.
Sure.
Well, it's early. I'm
Shit.
just saying.
Just saying.
It's never too
Yeah.
late.
You're right. I'll get it one day. One day. Like, no, I've already planned for a stroke late into my 70s, the last 10 years,
That's
bedridden. Yeah. But before then. But it's weird because I can't paint like that. Like, I can't paint with muted tones. I can't, like, tone it down any. And well, I'll go into a nice little depressed bubble like he will, but like it's all bright colors. I might as well go into a room and sprinkle like glitter on everything. Like it's just the opposite of what his look like.
Yeah.
But you know, as long as the feeling's in there and that's what you guys hold on to, that's what I want.
Awesome.
Yeah, because the paintings have to, you know, be the thing.
They exceeded that. And also, you weren't here for the whole weekend we were showing, but people came in left and right and were like mesmerized, fixed to it. Yeah. And also, there's that one big yellow piece that you did. And again, the folks at home in a second will have some slides to relate to this. But it had these lines, and it was kind of like dripping paint dripping down the wall. But to me, it was this pattern that I would get lost looking into it. And then there's something about the eyes and the senses, and especially bright colors. Like when you look at like the right red and the right blue together, and they'll move really easily. Yeah. There was something like that happening in your work. Where
I'm a big fan of contrast like that.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And well, you're using it really well. There was something happening in your work, and I remember turning to Miho and being like, there's a power about this. I can't. It actually challenges me to look at it. It's actually a challenge to sit there and to look into it. It does something to you, and it's like, whoa! At a certain point, I had to look away. And that sounds really weird, right? Like you had to look away from a painting, but no, I was
victory.
Boom.
Yeah.
And well, if that's what you consider victory, then you're definitely there, man. And I think it's amazing stuff.
Involvement is victory. Like
yeah,
because it's like I won't watch video if I go into a gallery. I'm like, if you don't get me in that second, I'm not gonna watch it because you know that's an investment. It's you being subjected to that person's will. It's like being in a movie theater. All right. I've invested an hour and a half into whatever you have to say, no matter how bad it is. I spent $12 if you live in New York. Yeah. Like, I spent $12 on this. I'm going to sit here. I'm going to be quiet. Subject me to whatever it is you have to say. And you don't have that in a gallery, but you have to be like, all right, come, let's do this thing together. Let's kind of talk to each other.
Yeah. Also, in a gallery format, there's competition. As weird as that sounds, in a gallery, everything is fighting for your attention visually, even though the space is stark white and there's just pieces all over the place. It's just something catches out of the corner of your eye, and it's like a vibrant image or something striking and arresting that really hits you. All of a sudden, you fixate on it. Whereas if someone with like a video installation or something, you have to sit down, you have to wait until it starts. You catch it midway. It doesn't. You feel like there's a narrative that's being told, and that's different from something like that you've done. And when you see it, you can catch it at any time.
Yeah, I think the biggest threat is always real life. Like if you call somebody on the phone, what you're really competing with is not like what's immediately happening. It's what's around them. Because if I'm talking to you and I'm on the corner of the street and somebody crashes their car, that's more interesting than you are. Like if I'm on the phone with Blaine and Mike is right there, I'm more interested in Mike. And that's kind of what the paintings are. They're there, but there's a whole world out there that they're competing with.
Right.
And
just to, like I said, like the effect that when you're in the presence of it, just being in the presence of it and acknowledging, like, wait a minute, I'm not just looking at a picture. I'm in the same room as this form.
Yeah.
And I remember, just breezing through museums when I was younger and just like, oh yeah, saw it. Oh yeah, saw it.
No, that's the best way to go.
A little later, I tend to stop and to sit for a while with things. And now I'll go into a museum and I can't see the whole museum ever because I'm just like, I can't just walk through it. It gives me this weird disturbing feeling. But there are things like like your painting that hanging here, that the presence, and there's two things going on. There's a two-way street here, and I'm bringing something to this form, and to be in its actual presence. Unfortunately, the folks here tonight won't get that because we're showing them the slides. But I think the pictures are really good, and they're going to get a great idea of what your work is too. So.
Yeah, but I would also challenge people to see how fast they can go through a museum.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. I would race your friends to see how fast you can go through that museum and see all of it, because what's going to really determine the artwork is what you have to stop at. Like what you have to stop and look at. That's what you're interested in. You don't have to stop at everything. Like if there's a video about an elephant and you're like, oh, nope. And then you're like, I've seen it. Like, if there's something weird, it's like, oh, okay. If it's the Mona Lisa and you're like, there are 50 people in front of it and it's behind 3 inches of glass.
Yeah, all I saw was flashing lights and like some dark hair.
Like, I'll get the postcard, man.
Yeah.
I've actually seen that on TV. Let's move on.
Yeah. I mean, there's this thing about going to a gallery or a famous or visiting. It's just like a checklist. And you're just like, well, saw the Van Goghs. You know what I mean? And you're going through them all and you're not there to experience it.
But I think I've seen the Raft of Medusa which is, I think it's a Giriko painting. But I remember like coming around the corner and seeing it, and it's huge. Like it's bigger than the ceilings, wider than the walls here. And I was like, okay, this is pretty impressive. I was stunned.
Like it commanded your
like
sensory apparatus. You're just,
it's like awe.
Yeah.
Few paintings do that, but it's awe. It's like you want that feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even if it's a little tiny thing, and you have to go really close up to it.
The Hieronymus Bosch stuff, I believe, at the Prado did that to me.
Oh yeah.
That stuff was just like, let me sit here. But I like, as I'm claiming, I want to sit and be practical. Oh, let's sit and analyze this. What's nice about? And I love your approach, and maybe that's what I'm gonna do the next time I go. Is I'm just gonna march right through that mother, and something will stop me. Is what you're saying. And then when it commands you like that, then you know, right? That's an interesting approach. I haven't actually heard that before.
Yeah.
Do you want to set up kind of your history, Kumasi, and your methodology before we go into the slides here, or?
No. I mean, no. I guess the best thing to say about me is I experience the world through hating things. There are a lot of things out there, and one by one, I eliminate the things I don't like.
Okay.
And then I get to the good stuff much faster. So I eat a lot more pie than I actually eat crappy stuff, and and I don't like nature.
Really? Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
No. The kids out there who have allergies will understand that nature attacks you.
Yeah.
And there's no point to being outside in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just, it tries to kill you.
Yeah. And you add ticks and mosquitoes into that, and it's just like...
Yeah. And like water and like trees. No.
No, whoa.
Thanks.
Don't bring the trees into this, man.
No, I can make my own oxygen. It's fine.
Yeah, right. Cool. All right, so we're going to start showing some slides here. We're starting with this 3D work. I'm sorry, this is... yes, this one is what we're starting with.
Oh, yeah. That's 2D. That's actually... like 2006. That's what I was doing before. So, yeah, I mean, you'll get a better idea when you get close up to it. It's individual brushstrokes. Each one is painted by itself, and then it's cut out and composed to form paintings.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. That took me 3 times you telling me before I really understood what you were talking about when you say that. So what you're talking about is that each of these brushstrokes itself is separate from the other brushstrokes.
Yes. So it's fake painting with real painting.
It's almost a collage.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or
as my Scottish drawing teacher would say, a collage.
A collage.
A collage. Or a constructed image if you want to be...
Right.
Like,
looking at these, though, it's going to be... what I am interested in is scale. So, I mean, we have a white background, but what is the scale, or what are the scale of these? Do they range from massive 6-foot-high pieces down to something small? What are we looking at in terms of size?
That one's about 4 feet high by 8 feet wide. So.
Oh wow, cool. And that's the detail to it there.
Yeah. So the brush strokes are like 3 inches up to like I have a really nice 8-inch brush from a friend of mine. Korea. She's awesome. So for the basics, they are pretty large because they're human scale to the movement that a human can make when they paint. So it's the exact moment of painting, like that individual brushstroke. Like it's all a trick. Like everything with painting is a trick. It's a combination of other things to make you think something. And it's really easy to do. Like anybody can do it. That's the beauty of it. But you can also it doesn't make it good. Like it's like anybody can sing, but I don't want to listen to you.
Yeah.
And for these, it's simple. Like everybody can make a brushstroke. I taught a class on how to make brushstrokes. Essentially, I gave away the secret. There were like 70, 80 people who I taught how to make my paintings, and it's because it's not a secret. But if you can do it better than me, you can do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there are other things to do. And this is, I guess you can get a better idea of scale on this one. This one's actually in like a past studio that I had. And those are regular size lockers, so it's about 10 feet high, I guess. Yeah. And those are like 2003, 2004.
What do you paint them on?
They're painted on acetate.
Okay.
So for the old people, what you would normally draw if you were doing an overhead projector,
Oh yeah.
yeah, it would be that. And for the new kids, I have no
And these
idea
are
what-
oil. You use oil paint to do this, right?
Yeah, they're all on oil.
This one I really love. This is the actual paint curled up into a 3D form, right?
Yes.
That is astounding.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, I really love how this one comes off. The way the light hits it, because, usually you see a painting and, it's like the example of the Mona Lisa with the flashing lights, because it's a flat surface and you get the light flashing on it. Flash a light on this and you'll get some other random texture, some fractal coming out,
Yeah.
And they're very organic and everything, too. I love this.
Yeah, I think a lot of people forget that paintings are objects. Like, we're so taught that it's a window into another world that you forget that it's an actual physical object with just color on it. And how much of what painting is can you strip away of it and still have a painting there? Like, immediately recognizable as a painting.
That one's really pleasing to my eyes. I love that one. That's beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
That's great.
And how long have you been painting in this style? Is this something that's been a long time?
You know what? That style was maybe 5 or 6 years. And I think the most important thing is to not get stuck in something you really do well. And so I know how to do those paintings. I could do 100 of them right now. And I have the brushstrokes to do it, and I could do them again. But I decided it was time to move on. And yeah, kind of break outside of the mold. And that's what this one is here.
Yeah, this is more the style that you showed at Bushwick Open Studios, right?
Yeah, yeah. And these are all dripped on the same acetate, but they're not actually from, what would you call it? It's actually not painted on the acetate in the same way the other ones are. So I'm doing this other series of paintings, and this is all dripping off of that series onto this acetate. So it's not directly applied in any manner, but still a three-dimensional form that's coming right off of it.
Is this applied in on an incline of some type, or do you do it right directly on a
Oh, that's
wall?
good. Yeah.
It's usually an incline. It depends on how big the space is we're making for. Yeah, but it's quite a debacle if you actually look at the studio.
This is a good photo to illustrate when people would come in and they would see this and they would say, "What am I looking at?" And they were also intrigued to say, "Are these separate brush strokes? Is this just dripping paint?" And I would try to, and when you weren't around, I would explain your process a little bit, and it just blew people's minds. They suddenly were looking at a totally different painting than they were 30 seconds before they understood what you did.
Yeah.
And just the concept behind that I really love. I think it's really effective, Kumasi. And these aren't always against a wall either, right? This isn't. I mean, do you have these come out and separate rooms and stuff like that, or is it always kind of hanging on a wall, or is it ever on a floor, or?
Sometimes depending on the space, they will separate rooms out. So you'll have from ceiling to floor, it will be just coming off in that space, and you'll have to negotiate it. But I feel like all of them are kind of a negotiation of space.
I see.
Like, you have to come in, you have to walk around it, or you have to get farther away from it because it's too much.
Exactly. And I think these do show exactly what I was talking about a little earlier about how it will challenge your senses. You stand in front of something like this, and then what you're going to see is different from when you first look at it after a couple minutes. This one especially, I love this one, and so the colors that are mixing, the detail of it is coming up now too. But
yeah, are those predetermined? I mean, do you start somewhere and then build upon it?
It would depend on the painting.
Yeah.
Like, I think in the initial stages, it was very predetermined. Like, I'm going to try this, and I'm going to see what this works out. And I have a color palette that I have in mind. But at a certain point, it's a negotiation between the painting itself and what you're doing. And you have to trust that whatever concept you initially set up for yourself or brought there is going to show through. So you don't have to be bound by anything. Like, I think, like, the really interesting thing about, like, what you guys were talking earlier about the rules that are set up. The really interesting thing is if you're in that rule set and you're just like, I'm going to break all the rules and I'm just going to do my own thing and whatever, you kind of end up responding to the same rules that you want to break. So you're still trapped in that system.
yeah, you might be the negative space of it.
Yeah, yeah.
But you're
like,
still there. Yeah.
You're like, I'm going to flaunt myself in every possible way. I'm the criminal. I choose that role for myself because it gives me some sort of power. And you know, I go with it.
There's a playwright named Alan Bennett who had a great quote. He said, when you remove censorship, you deprive yourself of a tool. And you need a line to work against in order to step over it every once in a while to illustrate your point. And I think if you disregard all rules, then there's no context for you to understand the work.
Yeah. I personally hate when anyone says think outside of the box, because that's just, there's so much shit inside the box. Like
There's a whole corner over there.
Yeah,
we haven't
nobody's
even
even
gone to
looked
yet.
at all of the box. I could, like, what are you talking about?
That's awesome.
Why don't you just make something that's good?
Yeah.
Why don't you just think about some stuff?
Right.
Like,
That's great.
how big is the box anyway?
Yeah, whose box?
Yeah.
And so these, how big are these ones? Are these along the same sizes as the first dimensions you were telling us about?
I think these are a little smaller. They're maybe 16 or 18 inches wide by like 40 or 50 inches long. So they're a little bit longer than they are wide. They're a little more human spaced, so you can kind of interact with them without being frightened. It's more of experiment.
The other thing when you had these things here was I remember I was taking some photos of them, and it was damn near impossible for me to replicate the color with a good 7D and like white balancing and stuff.
Yeah.
And I did everything right, and I brought the photos here on my computer, and I'm still looking at something totally different colors. So there's something about the colors that you're using and maybe the lights that we were using, and of course this brings up all the photographer's tricks of trying to capture accurate color, but I think you would be hard-pressed to have a good coffee table book that really represented your work, man.
Yeah, it's difficult because it as flat as it may seem, it is a three-dimensional work.
Yeah.
And the paint itself has a thickness, and there's a shine to it depending on the type of material, the paint that you're using, and that the color changes based on the lighting. So you really do get a different impression of it in person, which was great. Whereas when you see like a two-dimensional representation of it, it's different. It doesn't quite do it justice, but at the same time, it actually is very appealing.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. No, please. I was interrupting you.
I think the most interesting and probably the thing I would like the most about that is if you can get a reasonable facsimile of what they look like and you put that in a coffee table book, that's good enough for me. If you can get that closeness and when you see it in person, it's more than what you expected it to be, that's awesome.
That's an amazing experience, yeah.
Whenever I take a picture, I close my right eye as much as possible, open my left as wide as possible. So when people meet me in person, they're like, oh, he doesn't have a lazy eye. He's not that ugly looking. And, you know, it's the Gary Busey effect. It's like you meet Gary Busey and you realize that, like, Gary Busey is a guy doing Gary Busey. He's like, you're like, oh, Gary Busey's crazy. And then you see him and it's like, all right, this guy's Gary Busey is way over the top. It's like that effect. It's like you don't look down at the floor when you walk anymore. Look up and just be like, fuck it.
Yeah.
It is what it is. I am who I am.
Yeah, Gary Busey puts on like a mascot head of himself.
Yeah, like,
you know?
Yeah. It's like every day he's Edgar Allan Poe dying in the street. Like, it's just like, I'm out of there. Let's go crazy.
Can you set up these ones a little bit?
So this is a room. It's actually in Columbus. They were demolishing this building, and a bunch of us came in, and we were like, yeah, let's do some stuff. And it's a series of stencils that sets up a space that you walk into. So when you come inside of this room, you're engulfed in what the room is. And it's a series of symbols. I like to think of it as a little something I did for my mom. She's sweet, so we did this.
And so what I'm looking at, it looks like every inch of everything inside the space is painted, right?
Yeah, the floors are actually, is that polyurethane? With different symbols made in glitter. Because I like glitter. Glitter is ridiculous. And, but if you're a man, they call it metallic flake. If you're going to put it on a car or something, it's not glitter anymore, it's metallic flake. And so I set up different patterns on each of the walls that would have a different meaning or a different layout, also with the floor. So you were trapped inside of it, a little confused and a little weirded out.
It looks like even the windows are painted, right?
They are, yeah.
Yeah, that's what
they're frosted. Like, so
Oh,
the
cool.
pattern's frosted on the windows, so you can't see the outside world a little bit unless you go way up to them and look kind of through it.
Was it demolished with the work in it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
So, but it's all semi-permanent. Like, I think every artist goes into it thinking like, oh, one day they're going to discover me like they discovered the pyramids and they're going to wonder about my art. No, there are like 5 artists. Like right now, people could probably name 5 artists from 300 years ago. And that would be a real stretch. You have to be doing it for like right now and whatever your reason is right now. Don't expect fame. There hasn't been a famous artist since Andy Warhol. You're not going to be the exception. Like, everyone who's famous now is dead. So, yeah, just move on with your life.
I love that. Well said, Kumasi.
Yeah.
Do it for right now. Do it for yourself. Enjoy it. Love it.
Yeah.
And I love your work, man. It's really cool stuff.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well said, man. You're
Hey.
funny as hell too. I didn't realize.
I'm not. I'm not. I'm a horrible person.
Are you?
I am.
Yeah.
I am a horrible
You
person.
want to talk about that a little bit?
No, I mean, I am. Literally, like, I'm really a horrible person. I'm really nice to people because I know I'm a horrible person. And everyone who knows me, like, it's a reverse friend curve. Like, you meet me at first, you're like, wow, I like this dude. He's funny. He's kind of sweet. And you're like, oh no, everything he's really saying, he really feels. So he would walk by a dead body and not do anything. That's horrible. Like, is there some social responsibility? And he's like, I don't know if he has it. But yeah.
But
I also,
he's got this honesty about him that's so commendable, though.
I have nothing to lose.
Yeah. Oh
I have
man.
absolutely nothing to lose.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well said, Kumasi.
That's cool.
Very cool, man. Well, anything else? Did we miss anything?
No.
What do you? What's your status now? What are you working on, or you have any plans for any showings or anything? Any place that people can go view your work, or?
Right now, I think the last show just came down. I was doing a performance revival, it was called, and what we were doing was reappropriating music. So I did the Rolling Stones' "Sympathy for the Devil," and it's like reappropriating black music that white people have stolen and taking it back.
Yeah. Can you describe that actual installation? When you told me
messed up,
about it,
man.
I thought it was amazing.
Hey man, they're the greatest blues
can't
cover
believe you.
band in the world.
Yeah.
They've never made anything
got
original.
nerve,
And,
dude.
yeah. So like this one, I did one way back. It's with an artist called Jefferson Pinder, and I think if you go to jeffersonpinder.com, he'll have a link to it. It might have just come down. It was in D.C. at G Fine Arts, and I was doing the central lead. So it was multi-channel, one with my face on it with a ridiculous beard that I grew out. just
There's
for
a
the-
video,
Yeah.
right? Yep. Mm-hmm.
So I'm on one, and then you have people doing the backgrounds on the other 4. And there were a bunch of different artists and non-artists who were doing different songs, and kind of like it was just like, yeah, it's kind of powerful.
But you said it was all headphones, right? So you didn't hear.
Headphones was the first ones.
Oh, I see.
The first one was Juke, which was the same kind of concept. And for that one, I did Radiohead's Bulletproof. And was it Bulletproof? Yeah, it was Bulletproof. And for that one, you would see black people singing, like, and you wouldn't understand what was going on. You have a set of headphones, you take the headphones off, put them on, and you'd realize that the song wasn't anything that you would associate with that person. And so, yeah, that one is kind of what led to this one. And yeah, that one's coming down. I think other than that, I'm going to do a book thing that's coming up in September. It's kind of an artist's idea of the book, but I haven't finished that one yet. And, next year there's American Noir, which is kind of about the experience of what American life is supposed to be and what happens when you actually get older. Because I think at some point everybody realizes what life is. Like, you're born and then you're like, and then at some point, hopefully you become aware. Like, I know some people can go their whole lives without becoming aware, but there's some point you become conscious of where you are. Like, I became conscious in the 80s, and I'm like, oh, this sucks. Like, I'm like skinny ties, Z Cavarici, like really bad music, like real good hip hop hadn't started at that point, and you're just like, and then you like
I think that's what made you aware.
Yeah,
The horribleness, and it carried through.
Reagan did it. You know what? I was like,
Yeah.
I saw him on like TV one day talking about things, and I was like, that's not how I'm experiencing this world at all.
Yeah,
exactly.
I was like, what? And then I looked around, and I was like, oh, no. And that's why I don't live in my hometown anymore. I'm just like, I don't think I can do this anymore. I've got to get out. So, yeah, that's one's kind of going to be about that. That's going to be... When was this nation born? Oh, July 4th. I'm sorry. It's July 4th of next year, and then I'm still working on something for the following year. I'm going to do an international thing with a couple of my friends.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. And do you have a webpage or something we can direct people to?
KumasiBarnett.com.
KumasiBarnett.com.
Yeah. I also have a Twitter and a Tumblr I pay no attention to.
All right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Should we have other people pay no attention to it? Or
No. By all accounts, go to the Tumblr, go to the Twitter. I think there are links up by it, and you'll just invade my personal life. And we'll pretend it never happened, and you can ask me about things when you meet me in person that you already know happened.
Yeah, right. Awesome. Yeah. There's a lot of pre-search done on you that way.
Yeah, like a next level Facebook stalk.
Awesome. Very cool, man. Our pleasure to have you here. The work is amazing. Thanks for joining us,
Thanks
Kumasi
for having me.
Barnett.
Thanks for having
As
me.
always, man. Good stuff.
Very, very cool.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, you're gonna hang with us, I hope, a bit, and
Yeah, I'm here for the music.
cool,
right.
awesome,
Yeah.
very, very cool. Thank you,
Good,
Kumasi. Really, have a good night.
Yeah.
So very cool. I'm feeling really good about that segment. Like I said, I feel bad that the people at home couldn't, they can't really see like the grandeur and the texture, and there's a lot to those paintings that a video clip or a still can't capture.
Yeah, but I think, like you said, when it strikes you when you visit it in person in a different way. Like in corny as it sounds, like the third dimension when you hit it.
Yeah.
Like you saw that the Medusa, the wreck of Medusa, that just is awe inspiring, and it strikes you when you turn a corner in a museum and you see something and it really hits home to you. Whereas you might not capture that in a photograph or a reproduction or something.
Mhm.
But
Yeah, I love how he describes it. I had that experience the first time I saw a Van Gogh painting, and I didn't really realize how textured and how thick it was. And it was like, oh, this
Exactly.
is an object.
yeah, the art itself is the paintbrush itself. The technique is on display,
Mhm.
and that's something to be said for there. Instead, just a beautiful woman by a window and a vase. It's the actual materials when you get close to it, or the impressionist paintings. It's just so detailed and minute, and you're like. And then you step back and you realize this is a massive painting. You're like, oh my God, this must have taken years to make this painting. And then even that is just a display of the intent of the artist. You really get fixated on, and that's what you do with those works. You really see it when you see it in person. And if you get a chance, then I recommend it. It's really great.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Very cool. Knock knock. Oh,
This is a Jehovah's Witness.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's what I was looking for the first time. He totally succeeded this time, man. Really cool. All right, so we're gonna grace our audiences with the live performance of Cleve Douglass, Nick Chen, and Fumio Tashiro. Before we get into that live performance, we're gonna bring Cleve out and ask him a few questions and say hi.
Yes.
So everybody, welcome Cleve Douglass. Cleve, how you doing?
Welcome.
How are you? Thank you for coming.
Thanks for inviting me.
Of course.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah, I'm
So-
a fan.
We're big fans of yours, yeah. And so, like I mentioned last week, you were on the intro video. Did you actually see that little experimental video we did?
I did. I
Okay.
watched the last week's show. It was a great show. Watched the interview, watched the music. It's hard for me to look at myself, though, on a close-up. So it's
Oh, I
sort of-
see.
I had to go to therapy twice after.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm sorry about that. Yeah.
No, it was cool.
It was very easy for me to look at you because you have this presence about you as you're singing. I remember very specifically thinking on that little short, like, look at the emotion in this guy's face, and you brought a lot to that short, and I hope people go back to last week's archive and check that out. But
It was fun.
that was just
It was
something
fun
we went up
doing
on the
it.
roof, right? We're like, we don't know what we're doing. We don't know what we're
Totally
doing.
impromptu.
Totally impromptu. Let's do something, and I think it turned out great. And I think a lot of it was seeing how much you loved the song and loved singing. And that was really inspiring. I remember asking you, like, well, do you have some song? Like, what would you want to do, Cleve?
Right.
And that's what you came out with.
Right.
And when I watch back on that, I feel like he's in love with this art, and it's showing,
It was the atmosphere. I think it was totally inspired. Being up on the roof. One of my favorite places to be in this urban environment is getting up on the roof and then looking out. Each rooftop becomes a mountaintop in an urban environment, and the view, I was inspired, and just because the song was Stardust, in case your audience didn't know what the song was, it sort of almost symbolic, almost in the moment, the lyrics, so it sort of felt like it might fit. You know, so it was more of an aesthetic choice, I think, of where we were and being inspired by that.
Well, it was an excellent choice because also Daniel and Greg were in that video, and they were putting together these totally random, sometimes dissonant pieces that we recorded and re-edited. Some of the audio on that is flipped in reverse, and so, but there are these moments where it fits the exact tone that you're singing. Right. And Daniel and I listened to it very closely, and he's got ears like a bat. You know, he's really good at tuning into certain tones. Right. And we watched back on that. We're like, I can't believe that it's syncing up at parts. Yes. And it was totally random, totally let's see what happens. Just like tonight's video was kind of random. And let's see where it syncs up and what's completely dissonant. But that was pretty magical, I thought. It was very cool. I was glad you joined us for that.
It's almost like John Cage's chance music. You know, like every once in a while it will overlap, and then there's little flashing brilliant moments that really keep you tuned into it. That video was the first time that I had seen or heard anything. And then when we had talked about it, he's like, oh, he's going to be on the show next week. And I was just really, really excited to hear and see more of it because it was just really phenomenal. I really thought it was great.
I was excited about what Mike did with it in making the photo montage or the film montage and what you were able to come up with and create from that. So that was kind of, you know, my interest in it was watching your work and what you did with what all the musicians had done.
Right, and how cool with Dan and Greg and they're on top of that. They're doing their own things. And I really love that kind of art.
I thought it was a brilliant choice, too, in terms of song, because it's a standard. It's like a classic jazz standard, and then presented in a new or a different context. Yes. It might be a theme that goes on around here, I suppose. It's just a classic presented in a different context. Is that where you come from? Is that your style or your history?
I think, I was trained classically, of course, starting at a very young age. So it was all about the strict reproduction of what had been done previously. And so in classical training, your goal or you're aiming for perfection to what the composer has written, and it must be every single exact thing. And I think what excites me about doing jazz or improvisational is the freedom to step away from what is written and then interpret that by what your ear hears or your own aesthetic of what you would do with the tune, and then setting it in a different way, an unexpected way, I think is exciting to me. Taking a standard, it's almost like dressing up a room or taking something that was very old and antique and then saying, oh, let's make it look like it's modern now. And that's what with the standard jazz music, the American Songbook, for instance, taking that and restyling it, maybe taking something that was a swing tune and turning it into a bossa nova. And to me, that's interesting. Or I do a song that seems that everybody around the world knows the song Misty. You know, look at me, and doing it fast. Because I thought, well, it's actually a happy song, but it's done very slow, almost like a dirge in most times. That's the classic approach to it. But if you take it and you speed it up and make it peppy, then you realize, oh, well, this is really a happy song. It's not a sad song, but we only know the ballad. So in sometimes reinterpreting it, you come up with the actual intention or the feel of what the composer really felt. That it wasn't really a sad song, because the lyrics are very happy, look at me, I'm in love.
Yeah, that's one of the things I love about music is how you can breathe new life into any piece like that. When a new musician comes along or somebody puts a new take on it. Can you give us some of your background about your history in music and some of the stuff you've released? I haven't heard much. I have heard the album you worked on with Fumio, which was Duke Ellington's work. Yes, exactly. That's amazing. That blew me away.
Yeah.
So
We got
can
to listen to it together, so I got to watch your reaction to it.
Mhm.
It was funny. No, I started with music very young because of my mom. My mom was a drummer. She was a big band drummer,
Cool.
which is sort of unusual during that period of time. During
Yeah.
her period of time, she started when she was 6, and she stopped playing, came off the road when I was 4. My grandmother passed away, and so she no longer had the instant second mother.
Mhm.
There were drums all around the house. There were always musicians visiting. I would go to rehearsals, big band rehearsals, and sit and hear all these very loud sounds around me and very strange, unusual instruments around me. So it was the atmosphere. And then with my mom listening to recordings of mostly singers, even though she was a drummer, she played as vocalist all the time. She was always listening to bluesy, sort of, then would go into kind of a classical gospel sounds of Mahalia Jackson. Then she would go and she would listen to Ray Charles, and she would see Ray Charles in person and come back and talk about her experience in having gone to a Ray Charles concert. So I sort of lived vicariously through her music. And then I started being trained as a vocalist in junior high school. Our junior high school chorus teacher, I was in what they call Glee Club. I think Glee has now come back. The word Glee Club has now come back. It became the chorus, I think, for a long period of time. You took chorus. Now it's called Glee. And she picked me out one day and asked if I could stay after class. And I thought maybe I was singing too loudly, or I was in trouble, or, you stay after class, it's something very bad. And she said, no, I just want to ask you if you could ask your mom if it's okay if I would offer you private vocal training. And I said, I'm sure it's fine with her. She's a musician. She understands that. So I started studying classical singing, doing arias. Tiny little Italian arias, but you have to understand at this time I was from Tennessee, a tiny town north of Nashville, Tennessee, with a very strong Southern accent. And so the approach to singing Italian, we had to break it down phonetically. So I would know how to pronounce the Italian. So that was my introduction. And then I continued to study classically, because that training is what you need in order to sing pop music or jazz music or an R&B. Classical, I would say it's similar to training the body for the Olympics. You've got to go through running, you've got to go through strength training and building up the muscle. Well, that's what classical training does. The same as classical dance trains the body, classical singing trains the muscles and for support and technique.
But at that age, when she suggested you get more training and then you got into that classical technique that you're describing, did you know already at that point kind of where you wanted to go, or?
No, I was going to be a doctor.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I had no intentions on singing professionally. I thought that I would grow up to be a doctor, and I had actually, I had a godmother who was married to a doctor who had passed away, and she was a pharmacist. And I would sit in their library, which was dusty, but it was exciting for her to go back into this library, and I was wanting to pull all the books down. And I started at 12 reading medical journals and medical dictionaries, and then became a nurse as in high school, so I could work in hospitals and emergency rooms and be an ER nurse. All these things, I was intending to be a doctor. But as I got older, I started playing guitar and singing folk music, John Denver, Gordon Lightfoot, this sort of thing, some Elton John music, Joni Mitchell, James Taylor. I would listen to this music and learn to play guitar on my own, and that was interesting to me. during my later formal studies, the vocal coaches could hear that at night I was singing in hotels and small coffee houses with my guitar, and they could hear that coming out when I was trying to sing the operatic material, because they are purists in training. So I was doing both at the same time, singing pop music, folk music, and then going to class every day and singing classical music.
Wow.
So, yeah, I think the reason I enjoy doing improvisational and doing jazz is that there is that freedom. And if you're on tour and you're working every night and you're singing the same repertoire, it becomes more interesting if you can change it up, which you aren't allowed to do that in pop music. It's got to sound exactly like the record.
Right.
As classical's got to sound exactly what the composer has written.
Yeah, Billie Holiday's one of my favorites, and she had a thing about putting every single song was different, even if it was just subtle difference, that she would always do that.
Yes, yes.
And
I think artists tend to get tired of the same rote version over and over and again,
Absolutely.
and that's why they reinterpret songs. And when you see them later on tour, and you're like, "Oh, that's not the way it was on the record."
Yes,
You know, they've got to keep it alive for themselves.
yeah, a whole year on the road.
Yeah, I mean, or else
the
the song dies in a way. You know, they have to keep it alive.
Yeah,
by-
you're delivering it, and if you are tired of the way that you yourself are delivering it, then it's not fair to the audience to have to listen to someone who's really not interested in the way that they're delivering it. And it's actually should be, but it's not. The audience wants to hear it exactly the way it was on the recording, which to me is not that interesting. I would rather hear what they were doing in the moment.
Right.
I think it says a lot about the listener that they want to recapture a time and place that meant something to them.
Yes.
And it becomes on them like, ooh, when I was 16, I listened to that. And if I can go see this band on tour, do it the same way, then I'm there again.
Exactly.
You know, and
Yes.
then if you see an artist perform an old song in a new way, it just reminds you that time has moved on. And that you're
that's
not.
hard to cope with. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a difficult, it's a bitter
Yes.
pill to swallow.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, for the artist, they've are looking forward to time moving on. You know,
Exactly.
I want to get to the new
Exactly.
thing. I want to try something
Exactly.
else.
Yeah, and I think also material. It's not just the way that they interpret and deliver the song, but the material and the repertoire. The public expects the same song that you had a hit for in the 80s. And if they go to your concert and you don't perform that song, then they're disappointed. You know, he didn't do that song that like they got to hear in high school, or they heard on their first date, or when they were feeling romantic or something happened. And so it's the material. The public expects it to be the same, and the interpretation and the style. But it's not expected in jazz. You're allowed to stretch and to do different things and to experiment. So I think that's what sort of draws me to jazz.
I love that, and yeah, you're describing it. You're talking about a living organism, and it's something. I'm also fascinated by the fact that you started off on the path to become a doctor,
Yes.
and so there's a number of cases of that, like William Carlos Williams, or Tom Waits claims it, but I think he's lying. But like the idea of like you're an artist and you're a doctor, and in some way with your music and listening to your voice, and just like what we're talking about at the piece you did on last week, it's like you're not a doctor, but you are a healer. You know, you're using different tools now, and I think there's something fascinating about the healing treatment that somebody will get from one of your songs versus going to a doctor and being told, you know, lose 10 pounds and take these pills. You know, I was like,
Exactly.
So there's something really profound, I think, that's behind that. So many years later, and now here you are, you're a healer at the same time. That sounded a little too cheesy, right? Sorry, guys.
Yeah, but music can be healing, and music. You know, there is the entire institution of music therapy, which is used widely now, and even in becoming more popular. Music therapy. I've studied about music therapy, and it works. You know, and when you can use that as an alternative to psychotropic meds or things that don't heal, things that are more experimental until they finally find what works after a person's really deteriorated a lot of times. Music theory has been found to work in many, many cases of different psychoses, and Also, just for natural, regular, non-psychotic episodes, like just wanting to relax. For someone who's not able to relax naturally, and using music as a therapy, or sound as a therapy. It doesn't have to be, compositional music. It can just be sounds from nature that have been recorded, and listening to the sound of water or the sound of the ocean and this sort of thing can be soothing. Some people have sound machines that they sleep by religiously. They can't fall asleep without their sound machines. So music has a healing property.
Yeah, also you want to be in a different mindset sometimes. I know that with jazz specifically, for me, I like all forms of it, but sometimes I really like hard bop or like abstract stuff, because I want to put myself in a mental state.
Yes.
And it's funny because my dad always had this, like, I would listen to jazz and that was not his thing. But he was just, it sounds like they're all playing different songs. They're all playing a different song, and I was just like, I know,
Right, that's what's
like,
so awesome.
That's
about it.
cool.
Yes.
Like, they're all doing their own thing, and then they come back to the melody, the central tune, and then they hit hard and just like wail, and then they all go into their own separate thing. And it's just, I was like, that's what I like. It keeps my mind busy. I'm searching for different things within it, but some people aren't searching for that in music, and that's what my dad. Like, he was just, he's looking for something else, which is fine. This is great. But I thought he had a great insight into what that music that made me, that I was like, oh, that's why I like it.
That's why I like it.
Because why you don't like it is why I do. And it's just really it hit home for me.
I find that with people who say they don't like jazz, they say, it's too much to think about.
Yeah.
Because they're wanting something to gotta just kind of turn off and just let the music, I guess, pour over them and not have to think.
Yeah.
And I've seen people listening for the first time who don't like it. And it's kind of like watching, a dog when you're speaking to it doesn't understand, and their head just sort of
it's challenging
to tilt. And they're like, they don't know where you're going with it. But like someone with you, they want to think. They want to be challenged mentally. They want to be challenged, with what they're feeling at the moment, or to change what they're feeling. It's just different. I guess people want music for different reasons.
Yeah, that's great. Well, great way to put it. You're searching for something. You're prescribing yourself. Like either earlier today, I was in a mental funk, and I put on "I Can't Be Satisfied" by Muddy Waters, just for a couple minutes. I just needed to listen to it, and it was just like, yeah, okay, that's it. It just gave me enough, lifted me a little bit. I'm like, all right, let me go on and do my thing. It was a little self-prescription.
And of course the liberation, traveling through space, what the things that it's done for those great jazz musicians throughout time. I think people like Sun Ra or John Coltrane or Ornette Coleman or somebody. And I remember very specifically watching Coltrane's band play. There's some live footage. I want to show you this later.
Oh, yes.
There's some live footage on YouTube that's Coltrane's band, I think, when he's got a quintet. And they're all playing outdoors, and I believe it's in Europe somewhere. And it's black and white footage, and they are going, an hour or two set or something, it seemed like. They're all pouring sweat, but you can tell it's cold outside because all the members of the band steaming. Steam coming right out of their bodies. Yes. And I remember I saw that, and they're just in the zone. They're not aware of it. They don't know they're steaming or whatever, but there was something just so fundamentally like those guys are really free. Those guys are traveling through space and time right now, and it's inexplicable. Yes. But I do know that it's powerful, and so when we're talking about healing and all this stuff with music, that is legitimate. And so I'm really glad you're here to share with us. So you guys are going to perform a little bit. Can you set the stage who you're performing with here?
Okay. It's my first time working with Nick. I met him earlier, and I'm totally impressed with him. And I'm always looking for the drummer. I'm always, because I'm a rhythms person more than anything, and the rhythms got to be there. And so I always am listening for the drums. Nick, he's got it. He's got everything is right in the pocket. He's creative with it. The sound is just right there. And so I'm having a pleasure to get to work with him for the first time.
You got to live up to Mom, Nick.
Yeah, right?
The gentleman on bass here is like my brother. We don't look anything alike, but we're actually brothers in heart. Fumio comes from Japan originally, in an area called Kyushu, which is the southwestern part of Japan. And he introduced me to this part of Japan my very first time, and I continued going to Japan 36 tours.
Oh, wow.
And he introduced me to the world that I'm most comfortable in. Japan, I feel, is my home before I feel my home here. It's just organically I feel that because I went there. I think maybe because a lot of it I grew up in the South where you're taught certain manners and certain structure and the culture, which I didn't find. I moved to New York, and I thought, wait, I was trained for the wrong place.
Right.
But I went to Japan, and all that fell into place. Like everything that I've been trained for, you know, to respect to elders and certain ways to address people with certain things added to the way that you address them, as certain ways that you approach the language, methods of behavior were more structured. And that was comfortable for me. And then there were other things about it, like the great food and the beautiful people and the generosity and the respect and the courtesy is so big in Japan. So I have Fumio to thank for introducing me to Japan. And I'm working on, a very long time I've been working on a book. I visited Japan about 7 years ago with a French photographer named Philippe Bouquet, and he took 20,000 photographs.
Oh, wow.
And the hardest thing is going through all those photographs and trying to figure out and edit, and then trying to make the text and narrative live up to what you're seeing visually. So I think we're going to do some Duke Ellington tunes.
Awesome. Do you want the stand, Cleve, or are you just going to hold it? You're fine with that?
I'll just hold it.
Okay.
We're doing a tune that Fumio and I recorded together. We had been working with Duke Ellington's son, Mercer Ellington, and I asked Mercer if he would suggest some tunes that his father had composed that might be good for me vocally, because we'd worked together, he knew my voice. And he said, well, I'll just give you some of my father's music that's never been recorded. So one of those tunes was called My Father's Island. It's from an opera called Queenie Pie, which is takes place in Harlem. The setting's in Harlem. My Father's Island. My father's island upon the way back when. 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 Now the way back when was a river, and it flows from there to then. Who knows where the river flows when it wends and it goes round the bend. My father's island, it had one great big tree, tree called Little Flower, pretty as can be. She looks like a carnation from the sea, but what you cannot see is that she's a man-eating tree, and Little Flower belongs to me. Above that shine so bright, the misery of their fading light that shines upon our head. Sleep upon my shoulder as we creep beneath the wood, so I may keep this memory of our to make that go It's so exciting, you are so inviting, resting in my arms as we thrill to the magic jumps of you. Slide me here beneath the blue, my dream of love is coming true. In and out desert, Thank you. This is Fumio's arrangement from George Gershwin's Porgy and Bess, Summertime. And the living is easy. Fish are jumping, and the cotton is high. Oh, your dad is rich, and your ma, she's good looking. So hush, little baby, hush, little baby, hush, little baby, hush, little baby. Don't you cry. One of these mornings, you were gonna rise up singing your song, singing your song. Then you'll spread your wings and you will reach. You're gonna touch the sky. Yeah. But until that morning, until that morning, yeah, you know there is nothing to harm you. 'Cause you got your daddy and your mommy standing by. One of these mornings, you're gonna rise up singing your song. Then you'll spread your wings and you will touch the sky. But until that morning, there that swing. Well, it don't mean a thing. All you've got to do is sing. Now it makes no difference if it's sweet or hot. Just give that rhythm everything you got. Oh, it don't mean a thing. Ain't got that swing. Swap. Shout out. Let's trade, yeah. Wow. Oh, it don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. Oh, it don't mean a thing. All you've got to do is sing. Now it makes no difference if it's sweet or hot. Just give that rhythm everything you got. Oh, it don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Yeah.
That was really, really great. Cleve Douglass, Nick Chen, Fumio Tashiro. Again, Cleve Douglass, Nick Chen, Fumio Tashiro. Yes, that was very, very cool. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
So right now, we're running toward the end of the show. What we're going to do is we're going to do our little experimental improvised breakdown now. And it's going to be a short one, so we're going to jam for about 5 minutes before we say goodbye. And I just want to thank all the guests on the show tonight. It's a really great show. I'm really pleased. Caemeron Crain, thank you so much for being on the show. I want everybody to check out his articles, mantlethought.org. I also want to thank Cleve Douglass so much for gracing us with his music and his history, and also Fumio Tashiro and Nick Chen for backing him. I also want to really thank Kumasi J. Barnett for joining us and sharing his artwork with us. So encourage everybody at home to look into these artists. They're really great. So we're going to have our little improvised breakdown. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for episode 10. Have a great night.
we are, episode 10. And even though the show is gonna end, I feel like we've only just begun to begin. So it's like sounds crashing, cymbals, bass, voice, vocals, trumpets, snares. And yet, I feel like I'm everywhere, and I'm right here. So, the ultimate synapses, the moment captured, that picture that I thought I would never see, has come to be right in front of me. So it's impossible to not see God when I close my eyes, because on the rhythm I ride, and on that celestial path I glide. So my mind is always aligned with the stars, because it's not about the fast cars. No, it's not about the big gold chains. Nah, it's about the things that make the lightning spark in your brain. So whether I'm getting a fire burning in my soul from a psychological discussion, or listening to Cleve sing vocals over bass and percussion, whether I'm looking at the oil streak across the acetate plains from a man's brain, I will stand before you and always keep saying, it's not about where you take off from, it's not even about where you land, it's about what you see as you cross over the land. Because skyward I look, my life's an open book, but there's certain chapters even I'm afraid to look.
Cleve Douglass, Chen, Fumio Tashiro, Blaine Kneece, Kumasi J, Barnett, Caemeron Crain, Dean Brown, Miho Morita on camera. Thank you guys so much for joining us. I'm Mike Wilson. Episode 11 next week. Thank you.
da